Hi students, this is Thara Ravisankar, Assistant Professor in Department of Media Studies, Nagar College, Trivandrum. Welcome to our cinema class. Today we are going to discuss on Malayalam cinema, our favorite film industry, right? We have to talk a lot on the history, the growth, and the current status of Malayalam cinema. So, I hope my students will be interested in listening to this class. Anyway, I'll start with the history of Malayalam cinema. What about the history of Malayalam cinema? Actually, the Malayalam film industry is known as Bollywood. And it starts with Vigada Kumaran by J.C. Daniel. Anyway, I'll share the slide and definitely you could get more information from the slide which I'm going to share, and kindly listen to my class too. And if you have any doubts, don't hesitate to ask. Even before, much before the arrival of cinema, Malayalam cinema got inspired by so many visual arts in Malayalam film industry. That means the people of Kerala were very familiar with the moving images on the screen through the traditional art form like Tolpavakothu, puppetry, usually exhibited at festivals at village temples. Tolpavakothu uses puppets made of leather with flexible joints. And these joints are moved using sticks, and the shadows of these moving puppets are captured on screen using a light source from behind, creating dramatic moving images on the screen. Stories from the mythology were told so with accompanying dialogues and songs with traditional percussions like chenda. Tolpavakuthu uses some of the techniques widely used in cinema like close-ups and long shots. Apart from the art of Tolpavakuthu, which exhibits the nature of cinema, many of the folk arts and the classical art forms like Kuthu, Kudiyatam, Kadagali, they exhibited very high visual qualities in their form. Maybe because of this legacy of Kerala's visual culture, which led the filmmakers of Kerala to take up cinema in a different way rather than mere plain storytelling that was happening in other parts of India. That means the people of Kerala they appreciated this kind of filmmaking. Okay, and when talking about the early ages of Malayalam cinema, that means the cinema industry, Malayalam cinema industry is in South India or southern. It was actually started in southern part of the Kerala, which was dedicated to the production of motion picture in Malayalam language, and it was known as Mollywood. Malayalam film industry is the fourth biggest film industry in India, and the films produced here are known for their cinematography and story-driven realistic roles. And early ages of Malayalam cinema, when talking about that, the first cinema hall in Kerala was established in Thrissur by K.W. Joseph in 1907. It had a manually operated film projector. The first electrically operated film projector too was established in Thrissur by Jose Katukaran in 1913 and was called Jose Electrical Bioscope. Soon, such cinema halls were established in other major cities in Kerala. At the initial stage, only Tamil, Hindi, and English films were exhibited in these theatres. It was, however, Tamil cinema which dominated Kerala at that period, and Malayali audience welcomed Tamil films because of the cultural similarities between Tamil Nadu and Kerala. During 1920s, Malayalam film industry, which was started from Tiruvandhapuram, it started developing and flourishing only by 1940s. Later, the industry was shifted to Chennai, which was formerly known as Madras, which then was the capital of South Indian film industry. Madras people who were very really interested to be in cinema, be a part of cinema, they migrated to Madras. By the late 1980s, Malayalam film industry returned and established itself in Kerala with a majority of locations, studios, productions and post-production facilities here in Kochi and Tirunelveli. Several media sources describe Kochi as the hub of film industry. And when talking about the history of the Malayalam cinema industry, we could start with the early ages, which I mentioned. Trishur KW Joseph Theatre is theatre you could see it here, and the Jose Katukaran's bioscope and all. Okay. And active Malayalam film production did not take place until the second half of 20th century. There were only two silent films and three Malayalam language films before 1947. That was before independence. With the support from Kerala state government production, it climbed around 6 a year in 1950s and to 30 a year in 1960s and 40 a year in 1970s, and it goes on like 127 films in 1980, like that. Okay, I think I have to start from the early ages of Malayalam cinema. Okay, the first Malayalam cinema, Vigada Kumaran, was made in 1928. It was a silent cinema made by the father of Malayalam cinema, J.C. Daniel. And the second film was Marthanda Varma. The first Malayalam cinema was produced by J.C. Daniel, who was a dentist by profession and who didn't have any prior experience with cinema. His film Vigada Kumaran was released in 1928 but failed economically. But it is notable that while mythological films ruled all over the Indian cinema arena, J.C. Daniel had the courage to produce the first ever Malayalam film with a social theme. The economic failure of Vigada Kumaran discouraged him from producing further films. The ill luck of Malayalam cinema continued. And the second film, Marthanda Varma, based on a novel of the same name by C.V. Raman Pilla, was produced by Soundarraj. So Soundarraj or Sundarraj, however you like, you can pronounce it because he is a Tamilian. Soundarraj in 1933. But due to a legal confrontation regarding the rights of the cinema, the producer had to withdraw the film from halls after a few exhibitions. And it not been for the legal embargo, the film could have a great impact on the cinema of South India. By Marthanda Varma, the history of silent cinema too came to an end. Okay, and moving to the other cinemas, you could see a poster from Chemin here. Next important cinema is Balan, the first talkie in Malayalam film industry. It was the first talkie in Malayalam film industry made by S. Nortony. Indian cinema had already entered the talkie even before Marthanda Varma was released in Malayalam. Balan, the first Malayalam cinema with a soundtrack, was released in 1938. It was produced by a Tamilian T.S. Sundaram at the Modern Theatres, and Balan was directed by S. Nortony. Melodramatic film with more Tamil influence than Malayalam. Balan featured the struggle of two orphan children, Balan and his sister, oppressed and exploited by their evil stepmother until they are rescued by a kind lawyer. Even though this cinema would be considered irrelevant in artistic sense, its economic success created a base to Malayalam cinema industry. Followed by the success of Balan, Jnanambika was released in 1948. And by that time, the first major film studio, Udaya Kunchako, so Udaya in Alapi was established also. You can see it here. You can see the details regarding the first film theatre, that is by Jose Katukar, and also here Jose Theatres. Now it is known as Jose Theatre. And here you could get the information regarding Vigada Kumaran and Marthanda Varma, which was adopted from the novel by C.V. Raman Pilla. And okay, I am talking about Balan, right? The first talkie in Malayalam, Balan. And we talked about the Jnanambika, which was released in 1940. Jnanambika was a very successful movie. Jnanambika, we could say that it again rejuvenated the Malayalam film industry. Then comes the Prahalada in 1941, directed by K. Subramaniam of Madras and featuring Guru Gopinath and Tangamani Gopinath, the popular dancers, Kerala Nadanam performers who invented Kerala Nadanam, Guru Gopinath and Tangamani Gopinath. And until 1947, Malayalam films were made by Tamil producers. Artist P.J. Cheriyan was the first Malayali producer to venture into the field, and the trend then changed. So, P.J. Cheriyan explored Malayalam cinema with the cinema Nirmala. Nirmala in 1940, directed by P.J. Cheriyan. It explored the possibilities of music and songs in Malayalam cinema. P.J. Cheriyan's Nirmala. Legendary Malayalam poet G. Shankarakurupu penned the lyrics for the cinema. The song and dance sequence become an essential ingredient for commercial success in Malayalam cinema. It is notable that none of the Malayalam films then came before the independence, that came before independence reflected the mood of the struggle for independence, and also the films that came after independence and in 1950s reflected the torrid of Kerala, where the communist uprising was taking place, changing the entire social climate of Kerala. And cinema continued to be drama happening in a totally artificial and alien world. I think that was something related. When we are talking about the history of Kerala itself, we could see that at the time of emergency or the type of independence, Kerala stood in a different way from other parts of the India. That means in North India, its freedom struggle were that in hype, and Kerala was not that much involved because I think the people in Kerala were safe by the rulers in Kerala. We know about the early provinces like Travancore, Kochi, and Malabar, and they were very safely moving with these people. So people were not that much hurt. Maybe because of that, they were not reflecting in cultural cultures or kind of art forms. Maybe it's my own opinion. And next about another popular cinema in Malayalam, and that was Jeevitha Nauka. Jeevitha Nauka 1951. Jeevitha Nauka was a turning point for Malayalam cinema. And the highly dramatic musical film which narrated the story of ego crashes in a joint family and was mainly directed towards a women audience. And Jeevitha Nauka was a huge success, and this can be considered as the first blockbuster cinema in Malayalam. And by the cinema, the first superstar, the concept of superstar came up in Malayalam. And who is the first superstar in Malayalam? That is Thikkurishi Sukumaran Nair. Thikkurishi Sukumaran Nair, the first actor, the first superstar in Malayalam cinema. And the concept of superstar also came about the cinema. But by the success of the cinema, it has an adverse effect on Malayalam film industry. Films that were produced after Jeevitha Nauka were made according to their success formula, and nothing creative was seen for a long period of time. Superstar took over driver's seat, and directors were forced to the background. That means that was a situation after Jeevitha Nauka. It was a musical drama, beautiful cinema, and things were very socially relevant at that time. And when talking about next cinema, that is the Neelakoyil of 1954. Neelakoyil, through Neelakoyil, Malayalam cinema for the very first time had an authentic Malayalam story. And it got the President's Silver Medal, and scripted by Urub and directed by P. Bhaskaran and Ramu Kariyata. When talking about Neelakoyil, another film with adaptation genres, Neelakoyil, but it was penned by Urub and what Satyajit and Miss Kumari were relevant to stardom, or they were elevated to stardom by the cinema. And Malayalam film music till then were cheap imitations of Hindi or Tamil music. But by the cinema, Malayalam cinema's original tunes were coming up. The lyrics by P. Bhaskaran were arranged by, or music was done by K. Raghavan, and influenced by Malayalam folk music. You know about the കായലരികത്ത് വലയെറിഞ്ഞപ്പോ വളകിലുക്കിയ സുന്ദരി. All these are very popular songs of Neelakoyil, and this was also the first film to be shot outdoors. Neelakoyil announced the presence of Malayalam cinema in Indian film arena. And next, about another popular cinema, that is Newspaper Boy 1955. Newspaper Boy was the reflection of a neorealism in cinema, and it became popular all over the world. Neorealism, Italian neorealism. It was influenced in Malayalam cinema too. This film was a result of extreme hard work by a group of people. That means a group of college students. Newspaper Boy was directed by P. Ramdas, who was totally new to cinema, and almost all technical works were handled by amateur students. The film was distributed months before Satyajit Ray's Pater Panjali came out. So it can be claimed as the first neorealistic cinema in India itself. And the film narrated the sad story of a printing press employee and his family reeling through poverty. He dies of extreme poverty and illness, which forces his children to stop their education. His elder son Appu leaves to Madras in search of a job. Failing to secure a job there, he returns and decides to take up the job of a newspaper boy. That was Newspaper Boy, and the elements of Italian neorealism, all those what realistic plot, the realistic locations, realistic kind of narration, everything, the kind of lighting, everything is seen in Newspaper Boy. And now moving to the sensibilities or new sensitivities in Malayalam cinema. Even though Malayalam cinema, right from the talkie, Balan ventured social themes instead of cosmetic dramas from Hindu mythology, like anywhere else in India. They stood far away from, so that means they stood far away from social realities when cinema was made in other parts of India. But in here in Malayalam, it was all based on social themes. That was the speciality of Malayalam cinema. And Malayalam cinema has always taken its themes, relevant social issues, and has been interwoven with the materials like literature, drama, and politics. And such film was Jeevitha Nauga, which we discussed earlier. It was a musical cinema too. Then we talked about Neela Koil, which won the President's Silver Medal. And Newspaper Boy also, we talked about the Newspaper Boy. But since then, the cinema was revolving and cinema was getting rejuvenated in a new form. This was the concept about cinema, even among the leading film critics. That means cinema was moving in a different way. The Indian filmmakers were changing the kind of filmmaking, and in Malayalam, it was an exceptional way. That means in the filmmakers were experimenting with the social themes, considering cinema as a platform for combining all art forms, which was happening in all part of the Kerala. And Malayalam cinema was moving in a different way. The first International Film Festival of India, held in 1952, opened up window to a new world of cinema to Indian filmmakers. For the first time, they understood that cinema has advanced much further than the make believe Hollywood films, which were the only source of foreign films then. Films like Bicycle Thieves, which was shown for the first time in India, compelled a new genre of a new generation of filmmakers to take a new path of filmmaking. Satyajit Ray's Pater Panjali triggered the movement, which was taken up by other new generation filmmakers in North India. Malayalam cinema too took a new path during the mid 1950s towards more down to earth social realities rather than cosmetic social dramas. But this change in sensibility was not due to the effect of world cinema on them. The Malayali filmmakers were virtually absent at the film festivals. Hence, even though Malayalam cinema became more sensible during 1950s. It had to wait till 1970s for a considerable change. That means a new breed of filmmakers from FTII, Film Institute, Pune, they came up with a new kind of filmmaking. That means a kind of real cinema. And that again renovated Malayalam cinema in a new way. You could see the influence of music. Then the music took a turn away from the trend of copying Tamil and Hindi songs in the initial stage, like the poets like Tirunainar Kurchi Madhavan Nair, then P. Bhaskar and ONV Kurupa, V.R. Varma. They rose up in the period as film releases, like but the brother Lakshmanan, Dakshina Murthy, K. Raghavan, G. Devarajan, M.S. Baburaj, like all these people, Velappan Nair. They have a distinct style of Malayalam cinema music, and about the popular like Kamugara Purushothaman, Mehaboob, Kozhikode Abdul Kader, A.M. Raja, P.B. Srinivas, K.P. Udayabhanu, Shanda P. Nair, P. Leela, S. Janaki, P. Sushila, B. Vasanta, Renuka, Jikki were the most popular prominent singers of 1950s. And now we are moving forward with the history of Malayalam cinema. The early stages of adaptation films in Malayalam start with the silent movie Marthanda Varma, adapted from the novel of C.V. Raman Pilla, which was the second movie of Malayalam film industry, and ends up with Olum Thiru in 1970. In fact, it was the powerful movement that was happening in Kerala. That means they were literally giants like Tagari Shivashankarapilla or Vakya Muhammad Bashir, M.T. Vasudevan Nair. They were behind such creations. And the library movement, which coincided with it, became the real factor for changes in Malayalam cinema. This relation enriches Malayalam film industry with the new styles, trends, and characteristics of those parent forms. Malayalam cinema, which followed these footsteps but couldn't create its own cinematic form and remained as novels and dramas. And the growth of Malayalam cinema in 1960s is another important thing. So many notable directors came up during this time. After the success of Neelakoyil, films with the authentic Malayalam stories set in the backdrops of Kerala village started arriving. Minna Mininga, directed by Ramu Kariyat, and Rarichan Ennapauran by P. Bhaskaran were noted films produced during the late 1950s. Tagadi Shivashankarapilla's famous novel Randidangadi was also seen on silver screen. 1961, Kandambachakote, the first color movie in Malayalam cinema, came up. You can see the Ramu Karya, director Ramu Karya, who directed Neelakoyil and who directed films like Minna Minanga, Rarichan Pauran was directed by P. Bhaskaran. You could see P. Bhaskaran also there. And Kandambachakote, that was what we were talking about. Kandambachakote was the first color cinema in Malayalam. And this was an adaptation of famous social drama also. And next comes the Bhargavi Nilaya, 1964 film by A. Vincent. This is a notable film of this period, and this was a cinematic adaptation of renowned Malayalam writer Vakya Muhammad Bashir. His novel Yakshi was turned to silver screen through the cinema Bhargavi Nilaya. And next, you could see some of the film, the Bhargavi Nilayam, the post of Bhargavi Nilayam can be seen here. And Odailnan, another film by K.S. Sedumadhavan, very popular director of that time. And Murappan, 1965 by A. Vincent. A. Vincent, K.S. Sedumadhavan, they were the success directors who were spinning success in Malayalam cinema industry during that period. And anyway, Vincent also directed some of the best films of early ages like Murappan, Nagarame Nandi, Asuravitta, Tulabharam, and Irutinte Atma was directed by P. Bhaskaran based on M.T. Vasudevan Nair's story and gave a new face to superstar Prem Nasir, who till then been seen only in romantic hero roles. It was also the golden era for Malayalam film songs. The Vailar Devarajan Kutagatta, you know about the chemistry, right? And the Baburaj, Dekshamurthy, and K. Raghavan. They were the music composers, and lyrics by P. Bhaskaran, Yusuf Ali Kecheri, Sri Kumaran Thambi, and the famous singers like Yeshudas, S. Janagi, P. Leela, P. Sushila, P. Jayachandran, Kamukara Purushothaman, A. M. Raja, and so on. I mentioned some of the names earlier also, right? And that was the age. And then when talking about the famous films, you can see the famous names here. The Neera Koil, the P. Bhaskarans, Odil, and the Bhargavi Nilayam, Murapana, all these things come here. And the first South Indian film to win National Award for the Best Feature Film, which was that? It was Chameen, 1965. Chameen is a very notable cinema in Malayalam cinema industry, because before Chameen and after Chameen, cinema witnessed a drastic change. In 1965, Chameen, which was directed by Ramu Karyat, was the first South Indian film to bag the President's Golden Lotus Award for the best film, based on a famous novel of the same name by Tagadi Shivashankara Pilla. It was something a movie which pioneered the growth of Malayalam cinema in technical and artistic aspects. It brought together some of the best technical talents to India. That means the technical talents in India to Malayalam cinema, like Salil Chowdhury, the music director, Marcus Bertley by cinematography, Rishikesh Mukherjee editing. It had also a huge cast like Satyan, Madhu, Sheila, this Adur Pangajam or Adur Bhavani, S.P. Pilla, Kotarakara Sridharan Nair, all these veteran and actors were acting in this movie. And that was Chameen. And when talking about Chameen, the post-Chameen era in Malayalam cinema was a notable period, and it saw the upsurge in quality films in Malayalam. After Chameen, Ramu Karyat directed Edu Ratrigal, which narrated the story of a downtrodden, and renowned Malayalam writer M.T. Vasudevan Nair made his first debut film in Malayalam by writing a screenplay for Murappenna. Directed by A. Vincent, Murappenna was a landmark movie. Olon Thiru by P. N. Menon. It announced the revolutionary changes in Malayalam film industry, and was about to witness in the early 1970s a new generation of filmmakers who realized the uniqueness of language of this medium, ventured into a different kind of cinema. This cinema could be considered as the bridge between the two eras in Malayalam cinema. That means the cinema made by P. N. Menon, Olom Thiru. Olom Thirum can be considered as a cinema which marked the beginning of new wave cinema in Malayalam. That was the specialty of Olom Thiru in 1967. It was a new full-blown art cinema or parallel cinema, a new sense of direction, experimental direction, which was inspired by the French New Wave cinema. And it changed the Malayalam cinema into a new wave. That means a new kind of filmmaking that was happening in Malayalam. And here onwards, Malayalam cinema got split into two distinct streams, one as the artistic cinema and the other one is the commercial cinema. Students, we come to the end of our session. Next day, we will continue our journey through Malayalam cinema. Thank you for listening to me. Signing off, your teacher, Thara Ravisankar.